Tim Brasseth. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, my passion project, the restoration of the Passanetti House, and also my personal journey of discovery of the remarkable architect Haralamb Georgescu. I hope that by the end of my presentation you'll feel the same unfolding sense of discovery that I did when I came across this amazing house and was pulled through its history by people and forces that came together around me. And I got to know the ghosts of the two people who created this house and learned about this house's role in the evolution of an architect's unique style. So it was 2007. I had just flipped a couple of luxury homes in the Hollywood Hills and was looking for my next project. One Sunday morning, my agent called me and said, "There's this house you've got to see, you're just going to die." So I went to that afternoon's open house and was immediately thunderstruck by what I saw. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was a crumbling ruin sliding down a hill, overgrown, neglected, but clearly in its original, unaltered condition. You entered by crossing a rickety bridge that felt like a rope bridge out of Indiana Jones, complete with planks falling way under your feet. Once inside, you found yourself at the precipice of an open loft with the barest of railings providing little protection. A floating staircase took you down to a cathedral-like double-height space with dark ceilings that just lifted away. This was juxtaposed by intimate spaces for dining and sleeping. Outside siding of board and batten came right through soaring walls of glass. The house looked out to a remarkable deck that carried the lines of the house right outdoors with a towering lattice with views to the ocean and beyond. The place took my breath away. Even more alarming was the fact that it was being sold as a teardown with approved plans and permits for a Tuscan villa in its place. And that just made me very sad. So I had to have it. As soon as I closed escrow, I let the LA Conservancy Modern Committee hold an open house for their members. 300 people came through and stayed, took pictures, posted online about it, and all hell broke loose. The next day, my phone rang off the hook as people came out of the woodwork. Christopher Alexander from the Getty called me and said he'd been there and told his boss, Wim DeWitt, about it, and the Getty wants to help in any way they can. Ken Bernstein from the city's Office of Historic Resources called me and said they wanted to help and would want to landmark the house when I'm done. Trina Turk, who I think most of you know here, contacted me and said she thought she might know the son of the architect, a sculptor friend of hers in Palm Springs who talked about his dad, the Romanian architect, and she gave me his contact info. That led to Chris Georgesco, who I called and set a date to drive out to Palm Springs to meet him. I invited architectural historian Jeffrey Head, who, since the open house, had been stalking me for a story for the LA Times. So we drove out to meet Chris, and sure enough, he had his father's archives, which proved to be a treasure trove of drawings and photos of this house and lots more. Jeffrey was actually invited to join us on the panel today, but he's in Sweden researching his next book on Scandinavian design. We saw drawings and explorations and sketches on cocktail napkins, and it had even been published in Arts and Architecture magazine in January 1959. Not photographed by Julius Schulman, I should add. It was assigned to his friend Robert Cleveland, but Julius knew of the house, and when I was done, he came over to see it, and he was actually scheduled to photograph it when he passed away. We discovered that the house held a code, a very precise geometry made up of connected and interlocking 20-foot cubes, 20 feet wide, 20 feet long, 20 feet high, some bisected by floor plates and others not, leaving double-height spaces. Even the lattice on the deck defined a 20-foot cube outdoors. We found pictures of other houses that shared similar design themes. This is a later house in Pacific Palisades. You can see the Passanetti house's open loft pierced by a chimney column and double-height wall of bookcases and dark ceilings repeated much more dramatically as Georgescu's residential style evolved. This back wall in the dining room was later covered in bookcases to match bookcases above, just like it's done here. The double-height walls of glass and Nelson bubble lamp were repeated, along with indoor use of outdoor siding, again with more drama. Outside, we saw the open lattice work completing and defining the shape of the house repeated a few times. The board and batten siding and the stacked window columns separated by contrasting dark shiplap siding were other themes we saw repeated. There and there. My house was clearly a laboratory for themes later expanded upon. So I was faced with a dilemma about how to best bring this house back to life. Would it be a faithful museum quality restoration, or would it be an alteration-filled renovation? And here's where Ken Bernstein of the city's Office of Historic Resources was a big help. He sat me down and said, listen, this house has lasted 50 years. Our goal as preservationists is to make it last another 50 years. To do that, it has to be comfortable, marketable, livable, functional, economically viable. It's not a museum, it's a home, and it has to adapt to survive. So make your changes, but preserve the signature spaces that make this house special. And whatever changes you make, respect the architect's palette and materials, but make them clearly new. Draw a clear line between what's old and what's new. So that's what I set out to do. The floor plan didn't flow the way we live today. You entered right at the entrance to the master bedroom, which had only street-level windows, providing little sense of privacy. So you entered across this bridge, came in the house right here, and there's the master bedroom and the stairway down to the living room.
That was an important place to be.
For Passanetti it was. So the idea here was to turn the bedroom around and open it up to a new patio on one side and a view and loft on the other, which became the seating area for a master suite. Downstairs, the kitchen occupied a sealed-off room right there. And what had once been an open breezeway beneath the bedroom had been closed in at both ends to create an extra room and bath. You can see that this original rendering showed this open breezeway, which had gotten closed in here. And that patio never was really realized, as big as that is. So I wanted to return that space to the feeling of an open breezeway and create the patios from the original plans. And I pulled the kitchen out to create an entertainer's kitchen reflecting how we live today. So we created this new courtyard patio and walled this room, and we actually paved this in stone that went right through to the other patio, so it felt like a breezeway, and it was wall-to-wall glass at both ends. And it got the view right through the kitchen. So here's some before-after pictures showing how we preserved signature spaces, beginning with the loft and chimney column. And the remarkable floating staircase with that distinctive right-angled railing and the long wall of bookcases which appear to be supporting the loft. The dining area had a wall of mahogany bookcases to match those above in the loft, and a very dominant pass-through counter of white formica. We essentially pivoted that counter out to create a bar for seating, which partially obscured the kitchen behind, that I did my best to preserve the feel of the library with the mahogany paneling and open shelves. Instead of white formica, we used white quartz composite donated by Walker Zanger, who became a sponsor of the house, along with DuPont, who donated all the glass, and Modernism, who restored the original Nelson bubble lamp. I have to mention the sponsors contractually. The old master bedroom had a wall of closets behind the headboard that we recreated out of mahogany and replaced that high street-level ribbon window with a disappearing pocket door of glass. And we also created that outdoor patio, which became a sculpture garden with a sculpture by none other than Georgesco. Where the master bathroom had been, I opened it up to the loft with a pocket door for when you want privacy. And the bathroom became divided with a water closet to the left and an open vanity and shower on the right. The shower sits in a corner of floor-to-ceiling switch-like glass that turns opaque if you're feeling modest. I gotta tell you, there's no better way to start the day than by taking a shower, feeling like you're floating above the canyon with views to Catalina Island. So back downstairs, original drawings showed that courtyard that didn't exist and the open breezeway under the master bedroom above to another tiered set of patios. We created the courtyard patio to the right and a new patio to the left, and connected them with a glassed-in room that had indoor-outdoor stone tile that flowed right through, donated by Walker Zanger, thank you. We also opened up the sight line to through the kitchen, and so that what had been the proposed patio on the left is now a barbecue patio, and the room becomes a den, a library, and also a spare bedroom with a Murphy bed when you need it. Where the kitchen had been, tucked away in that separate room, we made a guest bathroom, honoring Georgescu's palette of mahogany cabinetry, white countertops, and gray tile, but in this case, a slab of gray basalt. Thank you, Walker Zanger. The new courtyard became an outdoor living room, which became a popular gathering place during parties. Passanetti's brief to the architect had been to create a house for a single man as a place to live, a place to entertain large groups, and space to work. And the house performed remarkably well, accommodating large parties, even a sit-down dinner for 50 out on the deck with drop-dead views to the ocean. I'm convinced that entryway was never completed as intended. There were angry letters in the archives about running out of money at the end of the project. We replaced the bridge with a new one that continued the railing from the inside loft through the wall to the bridge. And we replaced a standard-sized front door with an oversized pivoting door. And a new gated privacy wall of half-height cinder block in a stacked pattern, as Georgescu used to do them, was added at the street. Once inside the gate, there's now a dramatic procession to the front door that becomes a defining feature of the house. The sculpture is by Chris Georgesco, the architect's son, closing the generational loop for this remarkable place. After the Passanetti house, I was invited to consult on the restoration of another of Georgescu's houses, the Kearsarge house in Brentwood. You can see the unmistakable Georgescu touches here. The open loft with minimal railing, the back wall of mahogany flowing from above to below, the double height walls of glass, the dark ceilings that disappear. He even worked in the ubiquitous Nelson bubble lamp, right there, just like his other houses. And we saw the open rail floating staircase connecting split levels that had been done earlier. If we have a few minutes, I just want to touch on the man who commissioned the house. Without Pierre Passanetti, the Passanetti house wouldn't exist. And, you know, of course, he gave the creative brief to Georgescu for what he wanted. He was a remarkable guy, born in 1913 in Venice to a prominent Venetian family. By 18, he was a famous writer. He was facing arrest by Mussolini and was smuggled out of Italy by a group of American writers led by Robert Penn Warren. He taught at LSU, then UCLA. He created the Norton anthologies. We all had to use that in college. If you open the front, it says edited by Pierre Passanetti to this day. He authored dozens of books and screenplays, both American and Italian. He's the namesake of the Venice Film Festival's Passanetti Award, and he commissioned the house from his friend Georgescu in 1958. And as we mentioned before, he was a notorious ladies' man. When I moved in, the neighbors said, oh, you know, we called him Passanetti. And he died in 2006 in Venice, Italy at the age of 93. Here he is that's Passanetti, with the Italian ambassador and then Vice President Richard Nixon. Here he is clowning around with his pal Cary Grant and squiring Gina Lollobrigida. His best known film, his film archive is held at UCLA, and the Hammer frequently screens everyone's favorite film of his, which is Smog. It was filmed in 1962, black and white, Italian with English subtitles, about an Italian businessman stranded on a layover in LA for 24 hours and all the crazy people he meets and the parties he goes to. And a love scene is filmed in the pool at the Stahl House, Case Study House 22. He's a man who enjoyed his house thoroughly and entertained often. Here he is at work at his Georgescu designed desk in the loft of the Passanetti house. He and Passanetti ran in the same circle of European intellectual war refugees and asylum seekers in post-war Los Angeles, and they became best of friends. Passanetti commissioned the house from Georgescu in '58, and Georgescu and his son Chris here lived there from time to time whenever Passanetti was away, which was often since he split his time between LA and Venice. It was a once-in-a-lifetime privilege to restore this house, and I didn't do it alone. There are a lot of people I have to thank, including my partners and my sponsors and all the fans and people who helped with research and my architect and, of course, the contractor. Thank you.
Excellent. One of my major concerns in general about California architecture is that there is so much that we don't know. There's so much of the story far beyond Schindler and Neutra. Discovering people like Wexler and Palmer and Kreisel here and others here in Palm Springs has opened a new door into the range and variety of California architecture. And so I was especially pleased when Tim first invited me over to the Passanetti house to see yet another undiscovered, unknown, but really great architect. You probably get a sense of, from Chris's slides, those buildings in Romania that Georgescu did are really exceptionally well designed. They aren't just kind of watered down Bauhaus. They have the details, the composition, and I recognized that and saw that Passanetti is indeed just a great architect. What I'm going to talk about is a bit of this context of him in Southern California. For example, we see this house. There are similarities to the case study house number 21 by Pierre Koenig. Similarities because they're being built in the same place at the same time and out of steel, thin members, glass, etc. But Georgescu is not imitating any of the case study architects. He has his own idea about modernism. Similarly, later on, this is a retirement home, a rest facility that Georgescu designed later on in his career. He did quite a number of those. And it relates in the 60s and 70s, later in his career, to, for example, the faculty club at the University of California, Santa Barbara by Moore, Linden, Turnbull, and Whitaker as well. Slanted roofs, use of tile, regional vernacular elements, but still with a strong modernized, abstracted sense. So we have here somebody who is fully invested, and this is the amazing thing. When he was in Romania, he used Romanian materials from the 1930s and so forth. When he comes by force to California, he immediately, as a creative architect, understands what California is about. Different climate, different materials, different culture, and he uses all of those in a very successful way. I wanted to talk a little bit again about the context. A couple of these architects that he worked for when he first came to Los Angeles, because he never had a really prominent, successful career, like again some of the better known names that we know from Southern California architecture. But nonetheless, he did very good work, and he worked with very good people. These are all buildings by Paul Laszlo, who was his employer for a couple of years in the early 1950s. Let me go back a moment. This is Laszlo's own house in Beverly Hills, and it's definitely modern openness, but in, for example, the quality of the proportions. These are very tall ceilings. The windows, the sliding windows go all the way up as well. Laszlo was a great detailer of these sorts of things. Interestingly, also, William Kreisel worked for Paul Laszlo earlier and had that connection. This is a building for Robert McCulloch that has a connection here to, it's in Los Angeles, but McCulloch lived out here in the desert.